Good morning and welcome everyone to the first session in this series on Go, which as we have been progressing through the way of love, we are on the second to the last of the spiritual disciplines, Go. And this morning we will be introduced to this practice by our own Jared Weber Johnson, who needs no introduction, which is good because I don't have anything prepared. Well,
I could add that Jared is the rector at St. John the Evangelist and has been here for a while and has shepherded many programs and will provide us with a great conclusion or near conclusion to our series on the way of love. Mm-hmm. So take it away, Rector Jared.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Ed. And thank you. It's good to see all of you here this morning. As we heard, we are on the penultimate step in the way of love. And the goal, the hope would be that as we exit this with rest in the coming month, that we'll also take an opportunity to then look back over the summertime and really dwell on what do these practices mean for us in a discipleship sense moving forward. So I hope that you won't just see this as a course that you took and then able to sort of put it on the shelf next to other courses you've taken, but that you'll keep revisiting these practices and deepening your own presence to them. Today, as you heard, we are on Go, and Go is the practice I am most excited about. Those of you who know me well know that I don't like to sit still for long and that I like to be active. I like to be moving. But you also might know that before becoming an Episcopal priest, my wife and I were missionaries with the Episcopal Church's Young Adult Service Corps. And at the heart of the idea and ethos of mission is this sense of go. Jesus, as we will hear in the video, sets a pattern with his disciples who become the apostles of moving from place to place, going from person to person, community to community, bringing his ministry. But also at the end of his time on earth before he ascends, as we will hear in the Ascension lections, he sends the disciples. They are to go out to the ends of the earth. And that is a practice and a habit that is passed down through the generations to each of us. Some of you are long enough time Episcopalians to know that the Episcopal Church's 501c3, I believe it is, whatever the tax filing for the Episcopal Church is or was until maybe a year or two ago, and may still be, the Domestic and Foreign Missionary Society. That was the official name on all documents and papers of our church. That mission that we were sent has been at the core and the DNA of our church for a long time. And I know it was strategic that the Episcopal Church chose Go for the way of love instead of mission. One, it's shorter and pithier. But two, mission, missionary, missionaries, all of that understandably and rightly gives most modern Christians a little pause. It's not something that we would readily identify with unless we've done good work unpacking the long history of what mission has meant and has been twisted into. So today we'll talk a little bit about reappropriating, at least maybe not the word, but the sensibility of people who are sent, people who go. I'm going to stop talking at you so that you can hear from those who have prepared these lovely short, pithy videos. We're going to watch the video, and then if I have help, I will get you into breakout rooms so that you can take a few minutes to just speak, especially for those of you who are introverts. It'll be a little easier to speak in smaller groups. And then we'll come back together and we'll discover, listen to, and share what kinds of wisdom we heard in our sharing time in small groups. But now let me get the video up and make sure it's all set to go. All right, share screen. Oh, nope, nope.
The Christian tradition calls us not just to believe,
but also
well, that's
to bless
awkward.
The world with the good news.
I'm giving you a foretaste of what comes next time. Now we can share screen. It would appear that while I was prepping, it was playing in the background and moved on to the next video in the session. And I'm not going to give away the end.
As we discover the way of love and the practices through which we can follow Jesus more closely, we realize that Jesus did not stay in one place very often. The pursuit of Jesus can often mean moving out of our circles of comfort and going to other places, geographically, culturally, economically, spiritually. Because if there is one thing Jesus did, it is that he went out of his home, out of his town, out of his community, to engage with other cultures and people, to listen and dignify their stories. No matter their culture or station in life, Jesus was a listener and a witness to outcasts and sinners, drinkers and tax collectors, strangers and foreigners, the rich and the poor. He uplifted women who were considered unequal to men. He dignified people of other faiths or no faith at all. And he showed them the values of the kingdom of God through his teaching, through his healing, through his listening, and through his meeting them where they are and putting love into action. The scriptures teach us that it is also our mission to go out into the world. As the writer of John's Gospel quotes Jesus, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And as the first letter of John tells us, "Little children, let us love, not in word or speech, but in truth and action." Are you ready to make the commitment to go beyond your boundaries, to listen and talk, to love and serve, to use your gifts in the struggle for dignity and justice, for your neighbor, and for people who are outside your comfort zone? Are you ready to challenge yourself to forge new friendships, open yourself to new perspectives, and build bridges where once there were walls? The way of love challenges us to go.
So before we break out, I invite you to consider the very easy following questions as you meet in small groups of 4 or fewer. The question to meditate on is what did you see and what did you notice in the video about this practice? But also, what did you see and what did you notice in yourself as you listened and learned about this practice? And finally, if you want to go to challenging level, if you want to go up a level, is to think about and to pay attention to what you know about and what you heard even in this video about the person of and the figure of Jesus. And where does Jesus go? And how might that apply to you as a person who follows Jesus? Lean into your discomfort here. I'd invite you to not only share what you saw and noticed and made you uncomfortable, but what made you feel challenged and where might you being pushed? I invite you to take a moment to think about that. What did you see? What did you notice? What did you experience in yourself? Who is Jesus? We'll be back here in about 10 minutes or so, I think is the amount of time. So take about 10 minutes to be in your breakout group, and then we'll call you back to the main session. I think now Sarah is going to send you into your breakouts. So watch for that.
I am working on that. Jared, are you going to go into a group? Or?
If it needs that for even and roundness, yes, happily. But if there's a dangling extra, then I will stay out.
Okay. So
I did see that we lost 2 as soon as we said we were going into small groups. So I spooked people.
Okay. I am going to put you into a group then because I do have one small group.
That's fine.
And it's going to be 4 groups.
Before we break into groups, Jared, would it be possible for you again to repeat a couple of focus questions for us in those groups?
Yep, absolutely. What
you.
did you see in the video? What did you notice? What did you see and notice as you watched the video in yourself? And what did the video, or what does your knowledge of Jesus tell you about his practice of going? And how does that challenge you? So those are 3 ways you could approach it. If you want to just stick with what did you see and notice in the video and what was there. If you want to stay and pay attention a little more deeply, what did you see and notice in yourself? That's good too. And if you want to say, where does Jesus challenge you in this? Have what you know of him or what you learned about him in the short video. That's the 3rd level, sort of going down deeper in.
Okay, is everybody ready? Okay, Jared, I didn't put you in after all because I did have enough for 4 groups. I just didn't have enough for 5, but then I just didn't bother with the 5th room.
Okay, that's great. And so they'll stay in until about 9:23, 9:24.
Yeah, how much time did you want them to have?
10 minutes, but it looks like you put 11 and a half or 12 minutes on.
12 minutes.
That's great. That'll give them a little buffer of 2 minutes if they're needing to wrap up. So
okay, and they'll get a reminder a minute before. So
great. Yeah, I'm also the officiant and facilitator this morning of worship, so I do need to kind of end promptly at 9:50 so that I have 10 minutes to kind of get my robes on, get candles lit, make sure there's no glitches on the rehearsal end.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just in the middle of, I'm trying to do it in between this, so I'm pulling that data for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw some people put their, waited till the last possible second to fill it in, and we got 2 or 3 last night.
Yeah, we're up to 130 responses.
That's great.
Yeah, and it represents over 200 people when you add up how many are in the household.
That's what I had seen earlier, was that we were already close to or over 200 with the people who responded.
Were the pivot tables helpful for you?
Yeah, they were very helpful. So if that's something you're doing still for this one, that will help me, because I won't have a lot of time to do analysis.
Right.
And I'm assuming that the trend lines are the same. But
yeah, I'm putting them into the pivot tables again. I could even do a couple of very simple slides for you to graphically show.
I would rather not.
Okay, I'll just all right, I'll finish refreshing it then, and I'll get that off to you.
Great.
All right.
Yeah, the if we do another forum with people, or if we present this at Vestry, that might be helpful. But what happens with slides or with putting any of the data in front of people visually is that they'll zero in to becoming analysts for it. And what I'd like to do is tell them what we saw, what we found, and be able to interpret it this time around, because it's a coffee hour. So yeah,
that's fine. Okay.
And as a wise elder said, that we have the data and asked for it is, in fact, the victory people were looking for, is to be listened to. So yeah, that's where data becomes dangerous, is if you go past that.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to head back to it, and I won't be watching, but I'll keep the volume on. If you need anything, just shout.
Great. Okay. Hi, Jan. Did you get bounced out of your small group?
This is David. Unfortunately, Jan, because of her trouble speaking, she's.
Hi.
I can't talk very well, so I'm sorry. I just like to listen.
That's Okay, I understand completely, and I am so sorry that we presented us in a situation where it wasn't conducive to you, Jan. Stay on with us, because in just about 5 or 6 minutes, we'll be back in the main session and people will be reporting out what they heard. So you'll at least be able to hear some of the conversation in debrief, if that's all right.
Okay. Thank you, Dad.
Oh, glad to do it. And thank you for sticking around. We love that you come. So. Sarah, have you sent them a 2-minute reminder?
No, but I will. There's an automatic, it's set up to do an automatic 1-minute reminder.
Okay, cool. Fabulous. All right. And Sarah, do you need to call them back, or does that happen automatically?
It's closing right now.
Well, there you all are. Look at that. Just like magic. Good to see you all. And thank you for taking time in small groups to share and to be with one another. And so I'm not exactly sure how you normally do this if you're a regular at Formation, but my hope would be that we could, in both the chat or by using the hand raise emoji, which is on the lower bar under reactions, or just holding your hand up. I'll do my best to see you. I do have 2 screens here, but if you use the emoji, the computer tells me your hand is up so that I don't miss it. So, but I would love to hear, what are some of the things that you heard or witnessed, or some things that were sparked in conversation as you talked about what you were noticing and hearing in the overall in the video. So what were some things that happened in your breakout group, and can you bring them back to us as a bit of wisdom? Stories to tell. Yeah, go ahead, Jill.
Well, I'm going to speak for something that Judy said as after I was with Juanita and David and Judy, and we noticed that the video was, well, it was visceral. There were some things in there that really got at our core. And we also noticed that it appeared to be a lot about service. And Judy asked, how do we bring that around to worship and sharing the good news? And how do we do that in a way that isn't about evangelism and proselytizing, you know, some of the bad rap that our Christian faith has these days? How do we be at least for me, how do I be authentically Jill, vulnerable and willing to say who Jesus is in my life? And I said, when I'm in an inquiry about that, and I'm also in an inquiry about opening up new conversations, not the usual stuff we talk about. And what is it to interrupt the normal flow of conversation and talk about Jesus in my life today? If I'm in a good place, in a sad place, whatever that is.
That's a great question. I think that actually applies. Well, stay tuned for the sermon today, but Craig will make an invitation, I think, to us about how we abide in the love of God, not just in joy, but in sorrow and in grief as well. Like, what does it mean to stay in that love? And I think that's a moment that we're in right now as we come out of, slowly begin to turn towards leaving the pandemic. What does it mean? Because it's easier to sort of zero in on God's love and grace and support in times of crisis. Sometimes it's harder when we leave that moment. And so both end of staying with the good news. Who else? Thank you, Jill. That was a lovely thought. And for all those who contributed in Jill's conversation to that idea. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, and I think maybe going out to share the good news is less about giving this to other people than it is about being there for others and letting them give to you. I brought up the fact that many years ago I was in the Peace Corps. And you go into it with the sense, I'm going out there to do good for other people. And I realized that I really did very little for anybody else, but they did tremendous things for me. And I think being open to what others have to give in situations that may be uncomfortable, that's really what it's about as you go out. It's not the focus on what you give to others, but what you let others give to you, in a sense.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And David, that ties a little bit, I think, to something Aaron said last week about the nature of blessings too, that when we bless, there's something let go of or has to be let go of. There's a sort of a loss. And I think in many ways, the blessing you speak of here is the ability to let go of our need to be effective, productive, that our work would matter, that we would have something to give. There's a vulnerability there, and it's letting go of sort of that, whatever stands between us and vulnerability and receiving. Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, I see Daniel, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Thank you, David.
Yeah, I was just gonna, something that came up in our group, Barbara was mentioning, like at a funeral, I think it was her father said, you just show up. And I think in one sense, that's kind of what we need to do is less. I think the problem with mission or going is that we go with, hi, I've got the truth. And instead, what we need to do is just go and be present and listen and like Dave said, learn and not, we shouldn't stay away because it's uncomfortable. But also when we go, we have to know it's uncomfortable for the people that we're going to. And we need to listen to what they have to say before we have nothing, we have nothing to give. It's like when you were a kid and it's Christmas, right? And you run down and you open up the packages and, oh goody, I've got new underwear, right? What you might not necessarily be giving what they want. So that's kind of where I was at. Yes, you go, you're present, you listen, and whatever and you listen to what they're asking for, and from there you can then offer something.
That's beautiful, and you speak on a very important idea of gifts and wanting what is given, especially on a day like Mother's Day, where there are many people here who will receive things. They're like, thank you, I really wanted that. Learning to see the gift in both the intention, but also in the vulnerability and the just to see the heart of it. And I think that takes waiting, like you say, Daniel, to be the ability to pause, listen. I want to also encourage us to think about and to pay attention to who is God in our story, and where is Jesus in our story. Understandably, good, perhaps progressive leaning, mainline churchgoers like ourselves have been trained well in the art of self-consciousness, which is not altogether a bad thing. We've learned to be understandably and rightly guilty for the sins of our own Christian past. And those linger really heavy on our shoulders as we think about where we go next. And yet, being frozen by our guilt and shame of our past is not going to help us either. And I hear in my own response to this idea of going, a desire to unpack not being the wrong person in this, not doing wrong by it. And I think the antidote to our own self-consciousness, without it becoming hubris, without it becoming transgressive, is to listen and pay attention to where is God in this? Not just what's going on in me, not just what's going on in my past and in the past of my tradition, but where is God active, and where is the agency of God in this? And to dwell on that, to meditate on that. I know we'll get to scripture in coming sessions, but those stories are really important. Holly, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, you just inspired another thought, though, which was one of the things that we talked about in our group for a little bit, was the circular nature of these ways that we've been looking at. And so the ones that we've had so far have prepared us for go, right? So last month, actually, we had bless, I think, which was the one, I think, Jared, that you actually inadvertently were going to start us on today. But I think that was the one that we had. And so when you ask, where is God? To me, we were blessed before we go. And so, these steps around are important to think. And then I think the next one we're going to do is rest. So thinking about go in the context of the other steps is important. And the reason I had my hand up before you started talking was that I was going to share in our group our visceral, I think, reaction to that video at first was that we are being asked to go a very active, outward action at a time when we've been very inward and isolated and secluded. And so to ask someone to go right now, for some of us, feels a little unsteady, just kind of in general, because, we've been sitting in our own little houses and our own little worlds, virtually going. And now, to think about an active go is a whole nother kind of brain twist on this. So
that's really helpful, Holly, and whoever else was in that conversation with you. That's a really good reframe.
Daniel and Barbara, shout out.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think we need to be very attentive to where we've been in the last year. I think too, where we've been in the last year has also been a teacher for us in a way, that if we're coming to learn, if the good theology of the church is that the church isn't defined by a place or a brick and mortar, that it is the dispersal of people into the world on the mission of God. We've learned this past year how hard that and lonely and isolating that can be. The necessity of just not the space, but the gathering, the connection, the physicalness of our faith. And so that ebb and flow, where, if you pay attention to where Jesus is in the stories, you see him go to synagogue, then go out. You see him go to the wilderness and then go serve. You see, you see that kind of, the going isn't always one direction. And so that's helpful too. Good reminder. Thank you. Who else? Anyone else have a hand? Yeah, go ahead, Linda. I see your hand up.
Those of us who went to Israel realized what a go that was, because we sat on a bus for hours to get to these locations that within, I think, 3 years of his ministry, he walked with his disciples or whoever his pals were from one end of the desert and into almost mountainous terrain. One place I particularly remember was when we could actually see the Lebanon border. And it was a very unique place that was also in that era a shrine to the god Pan. Is that Roman or Greek? Anyway, he did some ministry way up there. And apparently it was ministry that went quite well. You scholars would know way more about that than I do. It was really remarkable just geographically to see what that meant. And I just want to also talk about the humility with which we need to go. And I think that we are going and we will learn far more than we can impart to others.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Linda. I'm aware that each week when our family goes on Sunday or Saturday, we go to my in-laws, we sit outside on the sidewalk, and I can say this because he's not here, but my youngest always asks, so what are we going to do when we get there? And we always say, well, we're going to Tutu and Tigger's house to be with them. We're going to go show them we care. We're going to go be with them. Sometimes we have things we can do. And he'll say, but what are we going to play? Like, who's going to pay attention? And we have to like downgrade the expectation that there's going to be things that are going to be super fun for him. And that sometimes leads to an existential place where he says, well, I just don't feel like I matter then. And I can relate to that. I don't know about you, but I can relate to that if there isn't something that I have been programmed to do, it can suck all the wind out of my sail. I don't want to just go to be. That sounds lame. That sounds completely contradictory. And yet how often in the church do we duplicate that philosophy? That if we don't have something to do, if we don't have wisdom to offer, if we don't have a project to accomplish, why would we go? Why would being with each other be important? And I think that's an important, like a challenge to us. I'm always working on that with the kids, but I think it stays with us. Who else had their hand up? Anyone else? Yeah, I see Roger with the stained glass window in the background.
I mentioned in the group what's often quoted as being from St. Francis is preach the gospel at all times, when necessary use words. But what he actually said, it is no use walking anywhere to preach unless our walking is our preaching. And I thought in that, just as you were talking about, go means we have a destination and something to do. And when you think about Jesus, as Linda well pointed out, he walked all over, and many of the stories are not things that had to do with why he was walking. He was reacting to whatever happened around him, and where God was working in somebody, he responded to and acknowledged that and supported what God was already doing. And so when we walk, or when we go, it's to keep our eyes open and let the Spirit testify to those around us that Jesus, that we're just present. It doesn't mean words, it means just paying close attention to what's happening always around us. So to me, that's kind of along the lines you were talking about, maybe a little more from the head, but it's still going and really figuring out which is more important, arriving or the process of going.
Thank you for that reminder, Roger. Yeah, I think one of the most common phrases in the gospel is on the way, they, and it was always on the way that these major stories of our faith arrive on the way. It's powerful. A good reminder. We have time for one more bit of wisdom or noticing that came out of your discussions or that have come up as we've been talking here. Mary, go ahead.
I have, this did not come up in our group, but I had a story that I wanted to share. There was a guy who was a priest and also a physician, and he ran a hospital in Kenya. And I heard him speak once, and he told this story. He said that he had seen a patient who had walked for days in agony to get some medical care. And this was a gentleman who had a prostate problem, and so it made urinating very painful. And so Bill, this physician priest, operated on this man, even though Bill was an internist. And this is a story about you do what needs to be done. You respond to, react to what's around you. So he did this surgery, and it helped the man immensely. And about a year later, the man came back and to thank Bill. And he said, you know, every time I urinate, I think of you. And Bill said to himself, I'm really glad I didn't do colon surgery. So you have to be in the moment. Thank you.
That is a bit of grace as we close today, something to laugh about. I think yesterday in our East Metro Mission Area gathering, our bishop said to us, one of the most important things I can pass on to you, the people of the Episcopal Church in Minnesota, is that we must take the gospel as serious as we possibly can. It's deadly serious. It's life and death. But he said we can never take ourselves too seriously. And I love that this is a good place to end. We can take the good news seriously, but we don't need to take ourselves too seriously. Thank you, Mary. Blessings to all of you. Much gratitude for this conversation. As always, this time is rich, and for the Faith Formation Committee getting us on this path, on the way together, on the way of love.